All right, so we've talked about the beat, rhythm, melody, harmony, texture, dynamics, tempo, and articulation. So let's put it all together in a piece of music. So this is a piano transcription, which means this piece was originally written for something else, but has been written now for piano, of the Hungarian Dance No. 5 by Johannes Brahms, who is a composer from the 19th century. So being a 19th century composer, he's going to use lots of different elements because that's just what they did then. So let's start first with just the melody. So this is our opening melody from the Hungarian Dance. All right, if you had to describe that melody in terms of articulation, what would you say? Okay, mostly it's legato. Everything is pretty connected. Right to the very end, we have a couple of little staccato notes at the end. So mostly a very legato kind of melody. Is it conjunct or disjunct? Does it move by steps or does it move by skips? We would call that a disjunct melody. Yes, it has a few little passages where the notes are running by steps, but mostly it's a lot of jumping around. So we would say this is a mostly disjunct melody. Now let's listen to what the harmony part has. Think about that in terms of articulation. How would you describe that? Yes, it's staccato. It's mostly like separated notes with the occasional legato for contrast because we like to have our contrast. Are you going to call that a melody? I don't think so. It's repetitive, yes, but it's also not particularly interesting. That's because all it is a set of chords. Remember, 3 notes makes a chord? So we just have our chords running along behind us. This happens to be in the key of A minor, so we're in a minor key. Here's a chance for you to listen for that sort of quality. Let's put those two parts together. Okay, so we have those two parts together. What would you call the tempo of that? Here's our underlined bit. Remember, tempo is subjective. So if you were listening to, and you were counting that as 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, you might think that's a pretty fast tempo. But really, those are divided beats. This is a simple meter, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's your real tempo. But again, you still might think that's fast, or you might think it's fairly slow. The tempo that Brahms has put on the piece is allegretto moderato, so a little bit fast, but not too fast. So what seems, that seems like a good tempo to me. It's a comfortable tempo for me to play it, so that's the one you're going to get. So we had, within that, at the very end, we even had some accents in the accompaniment part. Accent. So I've got this nice contrast, nice legato, disjunct melody on the top, staccato, basically chords on the bottom. All right, now the next section of the piece, see if you can figure out what he's done here. What's different about that? It's exactly like the beginning, except everything is shifted up an octave. So we have exactly the same music, just everything is an octave higher. It just gives you the same melody so you can get it in your head, but it gives us a little bit of variety as well. All right, let's go to the next section. So here's our new melody. It's a different section of the piece now. All right, so we have there accents, bom, bom, bom. We also have that rhythmic thing that we talked about, syncopation. So here's our beat. Bum, it comes in the wrong place. It's not on a beat. That's syncopation. And we have that repeated through this section. Let's listen to the other part. It's a little more interesting than it was at the beginning because it sort of bounces back and forth instead of being chunk, 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 chunk. So he's taking the same basic idea, broken it up a little bit to give you more interest. So here's how it goes together. Now, dynamics. What do you hear there? That again is subjective. That particular section is marked as mezzo forte, so sort of medium loud. The first section is marked mostly piano, so soft. But if you're playing a solo, there's nobody else playing, piano is going to be a relative term. It's going to be louder than you might think. So far we haven't had any really loud parts to this. All right, so let's back up a little bit and take you into the next section, see if you can figure out what happens. So we had several things that happened there. We had a little bit of a diminuendo going from the syncopated section into the next part, but we also had a tempo change. So we went from we had a tempo change. Did we retard? Not really. He's one of those that just says, hey, let's suddenly be slower. So we slowed down, and when we slowed down, he also made it softer, so it's really a big dramatic difference. Another syncopation there. And then a tempo, going back to the original tempo, loud, accented, big contrast from the opening section. All right, let's move on. Nothing particularly dramatic or exciting there, right? We have a melody that is sort of like chords because we've got a little duet going here. So you might imagine a soprano and an alto singing together there in a nice little harmony with the bottom part. Here's the next section. So here he says, okay, let's go slow. He's got a little retard with accents, and he moved the melody to the bottom, so that gives us more interest because it's now out here. And the right hand is playing the harmony. Speeds it up, slows it back down, speeds it back up. So you get this kind of a push and pull going on. Here's our next section. Same thing, slowing it down, speeding it up. And then back to the same sort of thing. So we can see this fairly short piece. This is only 2 pages long. There's lots of things. We have dynamic changes, we have tempo changes, we have legato versus staccato, we have octave displacements, we have syncopation, lots of different things that we've talked about, all combined into a single piece. So as you're listening to pieces further down the line, if you forget what a particular thing sounds like, you could come back to this, listen to this again, and get a reminder about what those different techniques sound like. Now let's talk about the texture of this. That's the one element that we haven't covered yet. Remember, our textures are monophonic, where it's just melody. Does that apply? Obviously not. We've got lots going on. So we have 2 choices. The other one is homophonic, where we have basically a melody with some sort of chords going along with it, or polyphonic, where we would have multiple melodies happening at the same time. This is a pretty straightforward example of homophonic texture. This part, it's not a melody. It's not something that's going to be particularly memorable. It's not the thing that you're focusing on. You're focusing on this. So this whole piece is an homophonic texture. You have a melody that's either here or occasionally in the left hand, and the rest of it is basically chords or pieces of chords giving balance and texture and depth to your piece of music. So that's the last element, except for form, and we're not going to talk about the form of this one right now, but you see how all the little pieces come together and we create one really lovely piece of music by Brahms.